what you would do is you were put in a tomb, you were laid down, and you would decompose for a year, and then a year later the oldest son would come back, take your bones, throw them underneath that platform because all of your ancestors' bones were gathered together. And Ezekiel looks out over a valley of Jehoshaphat, the alternative name for this here Kidron, and you notice it's loaded with tomb after tomb after tomb, and it's the context of the vision of the bones gathering together to an army. That's where Ezekiel's looking. That's where Ezekiel's talking about. Here's the difference, and why I say that that's not it. First of all, Gordon, who was a general, as we learned, basically he came to that spot, writes in his journal, says, I had an experience here, this is the place. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, if you were to jump over and land, or if you look here, right where we are, and jump over, is there, and we'll walk the Via Dolorosa, the traditional Via Dolorosa that normally people will take you from here across, is actually, for those of you Crusader history buffs, was overseen by Godfrey and Guy de Lucian. They only could control the northern part of the city, and pilgrimage to the Holy Land was big money, and so they would provide safe passage for you to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and so they carried that Via Dolorosa, but for different reasons we'll get into tomorrow, the whole place is in this area and goes out, but both of these options of the Via Dolorosa lead to one place, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which would be in. Here's where burial comes in. After the time of the Old Testament, for a brief period of about 200 years, burial in the Holy Land completely changes. What they do is that they keep the part of you laying out and decomposing, but then they create these little coffins called ossuaries, which is no wider than the person's hip, no longer than their femur, so that after you've decomposed, all of your bones now, instead of being put in a pile, are gathered together in one of these little bone coffins, and they are slid into, usually a tomb will have tons of these little hole openings called coquille, and you would slide that bone box in your own private little space, so we'd be able to know there's grandma, there's grandpa, there was no more bone confusion. This type of burial was only done for about 250 years, just prior to and just after the time of Jesus, but that decomposition process, and a year later the oldest son gathering the bones is what would happen. So just to narrow down here and come to an end with information, one last thing I want to talk with you about is Getsemane in this place. Talking about the bones, Jesus at one point, a man comes up to him and says, I'll follow you. He says, first let me bury my father. And Jesus says, let the dead bury the dead, follow me. What is he saying to him? He's actually saying, according, if you understand burial, my father's dead, I'm the oldest son, he's decomposing, I will go wherever you want. Just, I need to follow you at a convenient timing because I have this obligation. And Jesus is like, timing's everything, isn't it? That's actually the interpretation of what's going on, and then connected to when you understand burial. So here we are in Getsemane, the place where Jesus prays. What is Gat and what is Shmoneh? There are two Hebrew words. Gat is a place where you would put grapes and crush with your bare feet. It would produce the juice, and you would get juice and wine from that. Juice because we're Assemblies of God people, wine if you've got Baptist. Right? So that's how you crush grapes. You do not crush olives in Gat. The thing where they would grind with that stone olives is not called a gat. It is called an olive press. And out of that press, where they would pummel the olive to 1,000,000 pieces, and then they would put all of those chunks inside a net, and they would press down on it. And the first press went to the temple, the second press went to the cooking, and the third press went to the oil lanterns, and all of it would be out of there. Gat, Shmoneh, Getsemane, Hebrew word. Why combine those? All throughout the Old Testament, the prophets talked about the cup of the wrath of the wine of the Lord. And if you wanted to make the anointing oil, you had ingredients, and this is all in your booklets, but this is a beautiful truth Walter Butler taught years ago when Valley Forge was really a powerful truth. In Exodus 23 or somewhere, it's referenced in there, they would have ingredients. You would have the oil, and then they would have 500 shekels of calamus. And or 250 shekels of calamus, and which smelt beautiful, and then 500 shekels of myrrh, and 500 shekels of frankincense, and 250 of cassia. And so cassia and and then you would have cinnamon mixed in there. And what's amazing about this is the way that you would get these beautiful fragrances, like myrrh and like frankincense. Frankincense you would cut into the tree, and all through the night it would bleed. And if you taste frankincense, or if you taste myrrh, because they would take a rock to a myrrh tree and bruise it, and it would give droplets of sap, which they called the tears of myrrh. The painful process to the tree of extracting these ingredients to the anointing oil all resulted in what was used on the kings, on the priests, on anointing the temple. Why Getsemane? Why the Gat? Because you don't put olives in there. Why combine the crushing of olives and the crushing of grapes? Because here's the place where Jesus was crushed. God said it pleased me to bruise him. And here's the place where the cup was presented to him. He said, Father, if it can happen, take this cup from me. Not my will. And to stitch this all together, to give us 30 minutes of prayer here, I've come to realize, and you've definitely come to realize, for us as leaders, the most powerful anointings in our life have not come from our great successes. They've been squeezed and mixed out of our deepest sufferings. The greatest work that God would do for humanity didn't come out of his greatest success of becoming a king and waving his hand. It came through the crushing of his life. And every time I come here and I have my half hour to pray here, I reflect on my sufferings, and I remember how Scripture says these light and momentary afflictions cannot compare to the glory that awaits us in Christ. Here's the amazing thing about myrrh and frankincense that made the smell of the oils and the anointing beautiful. Although they smell amazing to the ancient world, they taste bitter. And what might be a bitter thing for you to swallow, the fragrance of Christ is being distributed to people around you. We're going to take 30 minutes, and you can make this whatever you want. Barry, you can live stream it.